Rain fell over the alien city like sheets of silver, turning the streets into mirrors that reflected the neon lights. Shadows stretched and twisted in the puddles, hiding the faces of those who walked quickly, never looking at each other. In this city, everyone minded their own business, and nobody wanted trouble. And trouble was exactly what followed the small alien girl walking alone in the cold. She had a small bag clutched to her chest, the strap fraying and ready to break. Her coat was too thin for the night air, her feet wet from stepping into deep puddles. Her pale blue skin looked even colder under the flickering light, and her glowing silver eyes were full of fear. Her name was Lyra, but no one here cared about that. A few hours ago, her stepmother had thrown her out. No warning, no explanation. Just a harsh shove toward the door and words that cut like knives. "You're useless, worthless, and you will never be part of my family," the woman had said before slamming the door. Lyra had stood there, rain already falling, feeling the truth she had known for years. Her father was gone, and with him, the only person who had loved her. Now, she wandered the streets without a home. Every time she passed a shop or a cafe, she hoped someone would see her and call her inside, but the alien citizens turned away, whispering things she had heard before. Half-blood, they muttered, bad luck. To them, she was nothing worth saving. Her small body trembled as she sat down in the corner of a dark alley. The rainwater dripped from her hair, and her hands ached from the cold. She looked at the tiny piece of bread she had saved from earlier. It was wet now, but it was all she had. That was when a shadow stopped at the entrance of the alley. Lyra's heart jumped, ready to run, but the shadow spoke in a voice that was calm. "Human and warm, you shouldn't be here, kid," he said. The man stepped closer, and she saw him clearly under the dim neon light. He was tall, with dark hair damped from the rain, wearing a worn jacket with oil stains on it. His face was rough but kind, and his brown eyes held something she had never seen in a long time. Concern, he knelt down so he wouldn't tower over her. "What's your name?" he asked. Lyra hesitated. People always used her name as a weapon, but something about this human made her want to speak. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice shaking. The man nodded slowly. "I'm Ethan," he said. "Do you have a home nearby?" Lyra shook her head. She wanted to tell him everything, but the words were too heavy. Ethan looked at her soaked coat and the bag clutched to her chest. He sighed and pulled a small packet from his pocket, opening it to reveal warm bread. He held it out to her. "Here, eat," he said. Lyra stared at it, her stomach twisting with hunger, but before she reached out, she asked something she didn't even plan to say. It came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere tired and desperate. Her voice was small, almost lost in the rain. "Be my dad." "I won't misbehave," she whispered. Ethan froze. The rain seemed to fade for a moment, and all he could hear was her voice. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a game. This girl was serious. She looked at him with eyes that had already lost. Too much eyes that expected him to walk away like everyone else. He didn't know what to say. He was just a mechanic. A man who fixed broken engines in his workshop on the edge of the city. He lived alone, worked alone, and liked it that way. But now this small alien girl was sitting in front of him, asking for something he didn't think he could give. The rain grew heavier, and Ethan noticed Lyra shiver harder. He made a decision without even realizing it. "Come on," he said, standing up. "You can warm up at my place." Lyra looked at him carefully, as if testing if he really meant it. Then she slowly stood, clutching her bag tighter. Ethan led the way, keeping his pace slow so she could follow. The city's noise faded as they walked into quieter streets. His workshop was small, with a metal door and the smell of oil and warm machinery. Inside, the lights were soft and a heater hummed in the corner. Ethan gave her a towel and pointed. "To a chair, sit," he said. "You're shaking like a leaf." Lyra obeyed. Wrapping the towel around herself, she watched Ethan make something hot to drink, for the first time in a long while. The cold in her bones began to fade, but her heart still raced. Would he really let her stay? Or was this just for tonight? As she sipped the warm drink, Ethan leaned against the workbench and studied her. She didn't look like trouble, but he could tell there was more to her story, much more, before he could ask. There was a loud knock at the door. It echoed through the small workshop like a warning. Lyra's eyes went wide with fear. Her hands tightened around the mug. "Please," she whispered, "don't let them take me." Ethan frowned, glancing at the door. He didn't know who they were yet, but something told him he was about to find out. The knocking on the metal door did not stop. It came again, slow at first, then harder, like someone was not just asking to come in, but demanding it. Ethan stayed still for a moment, listening. Lyra's eyes were locked on the door, her breath quick and shallow. "Who is it?" Ethan called out, his voice calm but firm. There was a pause, then a deep, rough voice answered. "Delivery." Ethan knew that was a lie. He stepped closer to the door, but didn't open it. Instead, he slid a metal bolt into place, making sure whoever was outside would have to break the door to get in. "We're closed," he said. "Come back tomorrow." A low laugh came from the other side. "Tomorrow might be too late, human," the voice said. "Tell the girl to come out." Lyra shrank into her chair, her hands gripping the towel like it could protect her. Ethan looked at her, and she shook her head violently. "They'll take me," she whispered. "They'll take me back." The knock stopped, replaced by footsteps fading into the distance. But Ethan had been in the city long enough to know this was not the end. He locked the second bolt and turned back to Lyra. "All right," he said, pulling a stool and sitting in front of her. "You need to tell me what's going on." Lyra looked down at the floor, her wet hair falling into her face. She stayed silent for a long moment, as if deciding whether she could trust him. "I'm not supposed to talk about it," she finally whispered. "Not supposed to, or too afraid to?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. She met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw the depth of her fear. "My father was human," she said slowly. "He worked for the Alliance, fixing ships, flying between worlds." Her lips trembled as she spoke. "He met my mother on a trade planet. She was alien from a noble family, but they didn't want her to marry a human." Ethan stayed silent, letting her continue. "They ran away together, had me, and for a while we were happy." Her voice broke on the last word. "But then, my father died," she continued. "His ship never came back." She swallowed hard. "My mother was gone too. So they sent me to my father's only friend in the city, the woman who became my stepmother." Ethan could guess what came next. "She didn't want me," Lyra said. "She said I was half-blood trash, not worth feeding. She locked me in a room most days." Her fingers tightened on the towel. "I think she only kept me because of this." From her bag, she pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. Ethan leaned closer as she unfolded it, revealing a clear crystal no bigger than a coin. Inside it, light swirled slowly, patterns shifting like a living thing. "This was my father's. She said he told me to keep it safe, no matter what." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "My stepmother wants it. She says it's hers now. But I know it's not just a memory crystal. There's something important inside." Ethan studied it but didn't touch it. "Have you looked inside?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know how, and I'm scared to try." Ethan leaned back, thinking whoever had come to the door tonight wasn't just after Lyra. They wanted the crystal too. And if it was valuable enough for her stepmother to send people into the rain at night, it meant trouble. "You can stay here for now," Ethan said, "but you have to follow my rules." Lyra's head snapped up. "Rules?" she asked cautiously. "Yeah," Ethan said. 1. You don't open the door to anyone but me. 2. You keep that crystal hidden, unless I say otherwise. 3. You tell me the truth about anything strange that happens. Lyra nodded quickly. Yes, I promise, she said. I won't misbehave. Ethan almost smiled at her words, remembering how she'd said that in the alley. She wasn't acting like a stranger anymore, but more like someone who wanted to belong. He went to the workbench and pulled out a small metal box, handing it to her. Keep the crystal in here, he said. It's shielded. Anyone scanning for it won't find it. Lyra took the box gently, like it was made of glass. Thank you. She whispered. That night, Ethan set up a cot in the corner of the workshop for her. The heater hummed softly, and the rain outside became a distant sound. But sleep did not come easily every time Lyra closed her eyes. She remembered the knock on the door and the voice calling for her, Ethan, sitting at his desk across the room. Stayed awake too. He kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to open without warning. When morning came, the rain had stopped, but the air felt heavy, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Ethan made breakfast, simple bread and tea, and watched Lyra eat slowly. She looked better with some warmth and food, but the fear in her eyes hadn't gone. He knew trouble was still out there. And now, whether he liked it or not, it was his trouble too. The morning light in the city was never warm. It was pale, filtered through layers of smoke and the tall glass towers that blocked the sky. Ethan had barely slept, his mind running in circles about the knock on the door. Lyra moved quietly around the workshop, as if afraid to make noise. She was looking through a box of old tools when the sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside. Her head snapped up, her silver eyes wide. Ethan noticed the way her hands trembled before she even saw who it was. A shadow darkened the workshop window. Then came another knock, not polite, but sharp and heavy. Ethan walked to the door, standing close but not opening it. Who's there? He asked. The reply came in a voice that was cold and deep. Name's Corin, City Security Enforcement. The alien man said, We have a report of a runaway in this area. A half-blood girl matches the one you've got. Ethan glanced at Lyra. She was already stepping back, shaking her head. I'm not going, she mouthed, almost without sound. She's under my care, Ethan said, his tone flat. That girl belongs to her legal guardian, Corin replied. She was taken without permission. Ethan felt heat rise in his chest. She wasn't taken. She was thrown out into the street. He said, That's not for you to decide. Corin growled, Hand her over and we won't have trouble. Lyra's voice cut through the tension. I'm not going with you, she said firmly, though her hands still shook. Corin's gaze moved past Ethan, locking onto her. You? Don't get to choose, kid, he said. Your stepmother says you stole something, a crystal. Ethan stepped in front of her. Conversation's over, he said, and slid the metal bolt shut. Corin didn't knock again, but his voice came through the door like a shadow creeping in. You're making a mistake, human. People who cross her don't last long. The footsteps faded. But the air in the workshop felt heavy. Lyra sank into a chair, her face pale. They won't stop, she said, her voice quiet. She keeps sending people until she gets the crystal. Ethan sat across from her, his arms folded. Then you'd better tell me why it's so important, he said. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the metal box where she'd hidden it. My father told me. It's more than a memory. Crystal, she whispered. It holds something. Instructions, maybe, or a map, but he never had time to explain. Her voice softened. He said if anything happened to him, I had to keep it away from the wrong people. And my stepmother is the wrongest person in the galaxy. Ethan studied her. She wasn't lying. Every word came out heavy with truth. But he also knew this meant the danger was worse than he'd thought. Outside, the sound of a distant engine roared. Then faded. Ethan got up and checked the small security camera. On the wall, he saw two figures in dark coats standing across the street, pretending to read a holoscreen. They weren't from city security. They were watching the workshop. He turned back to Lyra. "You need to stay inside, no matter what," he said. "If something happens, you hide in the back room until I tell you it's safe." Lyra nodded, but her voice was shaky. "Ethan, why are you helping me? You don't even know me." He paused for a moment, looking at her small, tired face, because nobody else did. He said simply, for the rest of the day, Ethan tried to keep busy, working on an old shuttle engine, while Lyra sat at the workbench, pretending to tinker with scrap parts, but every time someone passed by outside, she froze, her eyes following them until they were gone. As night fell, the city lights blinked on, painting the walls in shifting colors. Ethan locked the doors and checked the windows twice. Lyra helped him bring in some parts from outside, her small hands clutching a bundle of wires. It almost felt normal, but the feeling didn't last. A shadow passed by the window. Slow and deliberate, Ethan set down his tools and moved toward the door. When he looked through the small viewing slit, there was nothing there, but on the ground was a folded piece of paper, weighted with a small coin. He opened the door just enough to grab it, then shut it quickly, unfolding the paper. He read the short message written in dark ink. "Return the girl before it's too late." Lyra stood behind him, reading over his arm. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she looked younger than she was, like a child hoping a nightmare would end if she closed her eyes. "They know where I am," she said, her voice breaking. Ethan crumpled the paper in his hand, "Then let them know this. They're not getting you back," he said, his voice like steel. Lyra looked at him for a long moment. Something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself before. She whispered, almost to herself. "You really mean it?" "I do," Ethan said. "And if your father trusted you with that crystal, then I'm going to make sure it stays with you no matter what." But in the back of his mind, he knew this was only the beginning. The shadows from Lyra's past weren't fading. They were getting closer, and soon they would have to decide whether to run or to fight. The next morning, the city was quiet. Too quiet. The usual sounds of street vendors, passing vehicles, and distant voices seemed muted. Ethan didn't like it. Quiet in this city usually meant trouble was planning something. Still, he had a different task that morning, one he hadn't done in years. He was going to make a home for someone, not for himself. He had lived fine with just a bed, a workbench, and shelves of spare parts. But Lyra needed more. She needed a place that didn't just keep her out of the rain, but made her feel safe. In the back of the workshop was a small storage room. It was filled with boxes of old ship parts, broken tools, and scrap metal. Ethan cleared a space near the window, moving crates and sweeping the floor. Lyra watched him silently at first, unsure what he was doing. Finally, she asked, "Why are you cleaning that room?" Ethan didn't look up from sweeping. "Because it's going to be yours," he said. Her silver eyes widened. A mix of surprise and something else. Something like hope. "You mean? My own room?" She asked. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "It's small, but it'll be warm, and no one will bother you in here." She stepped closer, almost like she didn't believe him. "Can I put my things here?" she asked, her voice uncertain. "Everything you want," Ethan said. "Even that crystal, but keep it hidden." They spent the next few hours fixing it up. Ethan found an old heater in the corner of the workshop and repaired it. Lyra cleaned the dusty window, letting a little more light in. From scraps of fabric, Ethan sewed together a blanket, not pretty, but thick and warm. Lyra's hands were small, but she helped with whatever she could, holding tools, passing screws, and wiping surfaces. By the time they were done, the room looked different. It wasn't perfect. The walls still had scratches, and the floor was a little uneven, but it was hers. Lyra stood in the doorway, hugging the blanket to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've never had a room before." Ethan gave a small smile. "You have one now," he said, "and you're safe here." For the first time since she arrived, Lyra smiled fully, not the small, cautious smile she'd shown before, but one that reached her eyes. It made Ethan realize how young she really was. She should have been laughing, playing, and dreaming, not hiding from people who wanted to hurt her. Later that evening, they worked together in the main workshop. Ethan showed her how to strip wires and connect circuits. Lyra listened carefully, her hands steady as she followed his instructions. "You're a quick learner," Ethan said. "My father used to show me things like this," she replied softly. "It reminds me of him." The moment was warm, but the city outside never stayed quiet for long. From the small security camera, Ethan noticed the same two figures from the day before. They were across the street again, pretending to talk but glancing at the workshop every few minutes. He didn't tell Lyra. Not yet. He didn't want to break the small comfort she'd found as night fell. Ethan made sure every door and window was locked. Lyra went to her new room. Curling up under the blanket they'd made, the heater hummed softly, casting a faint glow on her face. She looked peaceful, but Ethan knew she was still listening for danger. Around midnight, the peace cracked. A faint sound came from the back alley, not footsteps, but the scrape of metal. Ethan moved quietly to the rear door, looking through a narrow slit. A folded piece of paper was wedged into the doorframe. He pulled it out and read the short message, "This is your last warning." No name, no signature, but he knew who it was from. Ethan returned to the workshop, his mind already planning. If they were giving last warnings, it meant they were preparing for something bigger. He couldn't just sit and wait for it. He would need to set traps, reinforce doors, and make sure Lyra had a way to escape if things went bad. The next day, he began working on the defenses. He reinforced the metal door with steel bars, installed a lock system only he could open, and set up small motion detectors that would alert him if anyone came near. Lyra noticed the changes. "They're coming soon, aren't they?" she asked. Ethan didn't lie. "Yeah," he said, "but they're not getting you. Not while I'm here." Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I believe you," she said. "I feel like I belong here now." Those words caught Ethan off guard. He had never planned on sharing his life with anyone, but now, the thought of her being taken away felt wrong in a way he couldn't ignore. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, Ethan sat at his workbench. Lyra was in her room, humming softly to herself as she tinkered with a small device he had given her. It almost felt like a family, almost, but Ethan knew, deep down, that the quiet wouldn't last. And when it broke, they would both have to be ready. The wind howled through the narrow streets that night. It carried the smell of rain and the faint hum of distant engines. Ethan sat at his workbench, pretending to focus on repairing a small motor. But his ears were tuned to the sounds outside. Lyra was in her room, the heater glowing softly. She had started to feel more comfortable in the space they had built. Yet, she still kept her bag with the metal box holding the crystal close by her bed. Ethan had warned her more than once, keep it close and never show it to anyone. She had promised she would. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Ethan was just about to call it a night when the faint sound of metal scraping reached him. It wasn't from the back door this time. It was from the front. He froze, listening. Then came the soft click of a lockpick sliding into the door mechanism. Ethan stood, moving quickly but quietly to Lyra's room. He tapped her shoulder gently. Her eyes opened instantly. "Alert, they're here," he whispered. Lyra's breath quickened. "What do I do?" she asked. "Hide in the crawlspace now," Ethan said. She grabbed her bag and hurried toward the narrow opening in the floor they had prepared for emergencies. Ethan pulled the small hatch shut above her and covered it with a rug. The sound at the door grew louder. The lock was almost undone. Ethan grabbed a heavy wrench from his workbench and stood to the side of the entrance. The door creaked, and a faint shadow slid inside, followed by another, 2 figures dressed in dark clothing, faces hidden under hoods, stepped in. They moved like predators, scanning the room. One whispered, "The girl's here somewhere." Ethan didn't wait for them to find her. He stepped forward and swung the wrench, catching the first intruder in the arm. The man grunted and staggered back. The second one lunged at Ethan, but Ethan shoved a metal stool into him, knocking him into the workbench. "Leave now, and I won't have to make this worse," Ethan said coldly. The intruders didn't listen. One pulled a short blade from his belt. The other grabbed a tool from Ethan's own bench. They came at him. Together, Ethan ducked under the first strike. Swinging the wrench into the second man's ribs, the blow made him drop the tool, but the first one slashed out, the blade grazing Ethan's jacket. Ethan kicked a crate of spare parts toward them, sending bolts and screws scattering across the floor. One of the intruders slipped, giving Ethan a chance to land another hit. The noise of the fight echoed in the workshop. Lyra, hidden in the crawlspace, held her bag tight and bit her lip. She wanted to help, but she knew Ethan had told her to stay hidden for a reason. The taller intruder growled, "This isn't worth the trouble, let's go." The other hesitated, glaring at Ethan. "This isn't over." "Human," he spat, before backing toward the door. They left as quickly as they had come, disappearing into the shadows outside. Ethan locked the door again, double-checking the bolts. His hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the rush of the fight. He pulled the rug aside and opened the hatch. Lyra crawled out, her eyes wide. "Are you hurt?" she asked quickly. "Just a scratch," Ethan said, brushing it off. "They didn't get you." "That's what matters." Lyra stepped closer, her voice trembling. "They're not going to stop, are they?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. Not until they get what they want." Lyra looked down at the bag in her hands. Maybe I should give it to them," she whispered. Ethan's tone turned sharp. "No, if your father wanted you to protect it, then there's a reason. And until we know why, you're keeping it." For the rest of the night, Ethan stayed awake. His wrench close by, Lyra tried to sleep, but every creak of the building made her tense. The workshop no longer felt as safe as it had. They both knew something had changed. By dawn, the rain had stopped, but the city felt heavier. Ethan stepped outside to check the street. There were no watchers this time, but a small package sat on the doorstep. Wrapped in black cloth, he opened it cautiously. Inside was a single item, a broken piece of his own security camera. It was a message. "Clear as day, we've been inside before, and we can do it again." Ethan carried it inside and set it on the table. "They're testing us," he said quietly. Lyra swallowed hard. "Then we have to be ready," she replied. Her voice was small, but it carried a determination Ethan hadn't heard before. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just a scared girl anymore. She was ready to fight for what was hers. And maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference when the storm came again. The next 2 days passed like a tightrope walk. Ethan barely left the workshop, and when he did, it was only for food or parts. Lyra stayed inside, her bag with the crystal never leaving her side. Every sound outside made them tense. Every shadow felt like a threat. On the third night, the threat finally came. It started with the sound of heavy engines outside. Ethan moved to the front window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see. A black hovercar sat across the street, its doors sliding open. 5 figures stepped out. 4 of them were tall, muscular aliens in dark armor. The 5th was a woman in a long coat of deep crimson. Even from a distance, Ethan could feel her presence, sharp, cold, and dangerous. Lyra came to the window, saw her, and froze. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "It's her stepmother." Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned away from the window and locked the front door. "They'll try to talk first," he said. "Then they'll try to take you. We're not letting that happen." The knock that came a moment later wasn't a knock at all. It was the flat slam of a fist on metal. "Open the door, human," the woman's voice called. Smooth, but laced. "With steel, we have business." Ethan stayed silent. She spoke again, her tone colder. "You have something that belongs to me, my daughter, and a small crystal. Hand them over, and I may let you live." Lyra's voice cracked as she shouted back, "I'm not your daughter." Her stepmother's laugh was soft, mocking. "You're whatever I say you are. Little half-blood," she said, "and you're coming with me." Ethan picked up the wrench from the workbench. "Stay behind me," he told Lyra. He unlocked the first bolt, but kept the second in place, opening the door just a crack. Her stepmother's face was striking, beautiful in a cold, unfeeling way. Her eyes scanned Ethan like she was measuring him. "You're protecting her? A girl you've known for days?" She asked. "Do you have any idea what you're risking?" "I know exactly what I'm risking," Ethan replied. "And I'm still not giving her to you." Her lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Very well," she said, turning slightly to her guards. "Take them both." The first guard stepped forward, but Ethan was ready. He slammed the door shut and dropped a second bolt from the side wall. He hit a hidden switch, the one that activated the workshop's defense systems. Small panels on the ceiling slid open, dropping heavy metal bars over the windows. The front door locked with an extra steel brace. Hidden vents released a fine mist into the air, coating the floor in a slick layer of oil. The guards tried to force the door, but their boots slid on the oil as soon as they stepped inside. Ethan swung his wrench into the first one, sending him crashing into a shelf of spare parts. The second guard tried to grab him from behind, but Ethan ducked low, rolling to the side. He grabbed a welding torch and ignited it, the bright flame making the intruders hesitate. Lyra stayed back, clutching her bag. But her eyes were sharp. When one of the guards spotted her and lunged, she darted to the side. She grabbed a loose cable from the workbench and swung it hard, catching the guard across the face. It didn't knock him out, but it gave Ethan the opening he needed to land a solid hit. Her stepmother stood outside the doorway, watching with cold amusement. "You're making this far worse than it needs to be," she called. Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy blocking another strike. Finally, Lyra's stepmother stepped. Inside, she didn't bother with weapons. Her presence alone seemed to push the air colder. "Give me the crystal," she said, holding out her hand to Lyra. "And I will let your pet human live." Lyra's voice was steady now. "This crystal was my father's, and he wanted it safe from you." Her stepmother's smile faded. "You don't even know what it contains," she said. "It's worth more than your life, more than his." Lyra took a step back. "Maybe," she said, "but it's mine." Ethan moved between them. "You heard her now. Get out," he said. Her stepmother's eyes narrowed. "You think this is over?" she asked quietly. Ethan's grip on the wrench tightened. "I know it's not," he said. "But you're not winning tonight." There was a long moment where no one moved. Then she turned sharply, motioning to her guards. "This isn't over," she said again, her voice like ice. The guards followed her out, a hovercar's engine roaring to life before they sped away. Ethan locked the door again and turned to Lyra. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly, but her hands still trembled. "They'll come back," she whispered. "I know," Ethan said. "But next time, we'll be ready." That night, neither of them slept. The workshop was quiet again. But it was the kind of quiet that came after a storm, the kind that warned another was coming. The night after the confrontation was long and heavy. Ethan sat at his workbench, the wrench still within reach. Lyra was in her room, but he knew she wasn't sleeping. He could hear the soft rustle of her blanket every time she turned over. Outside, the city was quiet, almost too quiet. The usual distant hum of traffic was gone. And even the stray street vendors had packed up early. It felt like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. By morning, the hover car was gone. No guards, no watchers in the shadows. But Ethan didn't relax. He knew this wasn't the kind of danger that simply disappeared overnight. Lyra stepped into the workshop, still clutching her bag with the crystal. Her eyes were tired. But there was something new in them, a flicker of determination. What? If they come back today? She asked quietly. Ethan looked at her for a moment before answering. Then we face them together, he said. But I don't think they will. Not yet. She tilted her head. Why not? Ethan leaned back in his chair. They didn't get what they wanted, and they know now I'm not going to hand you over, he said. People like that. They don't like open fights they can't win. They'll wait, plan, and strike when they think we're weak. Lyra frowned. Then we can't let them think we're weak, she said, surprising even herself with the firmness in her tone. Ethan almost smiled. That's the spirit, he said. So, we prepare. The next few days were spent turning the workshop into something more than a home. It became a fortress. Extra locks, reinforced walls, hidden compartments, and a better hiding place for the crystal. Ethan even modified one of his old drones to act as a silent scout in the streets nearby. Lyra helped with everything, holding tools, tightening bolts, and learning how to wire alarms between the work. There were quiet moments too. Ethan would catch her humming while she sorted parts. Sometimes she'd tell him small stories about her father. He used to make the best tea, she said once. He always said you can fix anything if you have patience. And the right tool. Ethan just nodded, but inside, he felt the truth of her father's words. One evening, after they finished securing the back door, Lyra sat on the floor, hugging her knees. Ethan, she said softly, yeah? Do you ever regret helping me? Ethan looked at her like she'd just asked the most ridiculous thing in the galaxy. Not once, he said. You showed up in that alley at the right time. I didn't know it then, but I needed you as much as you needed me. Her eyes widened slightly. You needed me? Yeah, he said, leaning against the wall. I've been fixing machines for years, but that's all I did. No one to talk to. No one to look after, no reason to come home except to sleep. Then you showed up and it's different now. Lyra's voice was small, but steady, I think. I want to stay here forever if I can. Ethan's voice softened. Then you stay, he said. No one's throwing you out ever again. The bond between them only grew stronger. It wasn't the kind of connection that happened quickly and then faded. It was steady, built from every shared meal. Every night they checked the locks together. Every laugh they managed to have, despite the danger. One afternoon, Ethan took her to the city registry office. She was nervous the entire walk there, keeping her hood up when they got inside. Ethan filled out the paperwork without hesitation. Name: Lyra Guardian, Ethan Cole. It wasn't just a legal document, it was a promise. When the official handed her the new ID chip, she stared at it like it wasn't real. This means, you're really my dad now, she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, it does. She threw her arms around him. I'll never misbehave, she said, trying to hide the emotion in her voice. Ethan chuckled. You can misbehave a little, he said. That's part of being family. The threats from her stepmother never fully vanished, every once in a while. Ethan's drone spotted unfamiliar faces watching from a distance, but no one came to the door. No one tried to force their way in again. It seemed her stepmother had decided that the cost of taking her back wasn't worth the fight. At least for now. One rainy evening, they walked through the same streets where Ethan had first found her. Lyra wore a warmer coat now, her hood down. The city lights reflected in the wet pavement, but this time, She wasn't shivering or clutching a bag like it was her only lifeline. She was walking beside Ethan, her head held higher. They stopped in the very alley where she had once sat alone. Lyra looked at it for a long time, then turned to Ethan. "I don't ever want to be that girl again," she said. "You won't." He replied, "Not while I'm here." She smiled, not the cautious, unsure smile from before, but the kind that came from knowing she was home. And as they walked away from the shadows and into the bright glow of the city streets, they both knew this was the start of something new, not just survival, not just safety, but a life, a family.